Taking over this role was not something that I did lightly. I jokingly say that I came in kicking and screaming.
What is like the hope for Nigerian art, in trying times like this? We all know what's going on in Nigeria and Africa and in the broader context.
I just believe in just as people, as an organization, as an art ecosystem, the more we lean on each other, the more we will be able to do. I'm really looking forward to people being more experimental with the kind of work that they're making. And that's why it's important to have more spaces that people can do trial and error in.
In this episode, we had the opportunity to speak with Oyindamola Fayeke. Oyindamola is the director of CCA Lagos, that's the Center for Contemporary Arts Lagos. We had discussions on her role as the director and how she's been able to continue the legacy of BCC through the ASICO Art School and the mentoring of contemporary artists in Lagos and Nigeria and even beyond the borders of the country.
Thanks so much for having me. I actually took over from Ihai Onwuegbucha, who was the curator or acting director after Bissy passed away. And I'm really thankful for him actually stepping up to the plate. And to me, he was the one that really steadied the ship after while Bissy was sick, but also after she passed away. And so he he handed over the baton to me. Bissy was a really important person in my life, in my career. And so taking over this role was not something that I did lightly. I jokingly say that I came in kicking and screaming because exactly what you said. I felt the burden or just the fear of filling such big shoes, knowing how important Bissy had been for me and how important she had been in general to just the global contemporary arts space. So I find myself in a very interesting role or at an interesting time in my career where I'm learning. I've never been a director of a arts space before, an arts center. So, I really had to hit the ground running. It was, and it still is a stretch for me. So it was about stretching who I was as a leader, as a manager, as a curator, as a art worker really as well. And so I've been in this role now for just over 2.5 years. And I have to say that it still is a role that is pushing me to be, I guess I want to say the best version of myself. And I feel like it was the right time as well for me. I had actually started my curatorial educational training with CCA in 2008. So I had a long relationship with the organization and also, of course, with Bissy.
Can we talk about the relevance of CCA in the Nigerian art space? Because I've been part of that platform of CCA as a mentee and as an artist working with BC when she was alive. And there are other artists who have also passed through CCA, like Emeka Obo, Kelani Abbas, so many of them. I just want you to speak to the relevance and the criticality of CCA in the heart of Nigerian art.
African art.
Oh, African art, because this is work, not only impacted Nigerian arts in, her work went beyond the borders into Mali, Angola, Cameroon, and all those places. Can you, briefly tell us how relevant, this informal art space is in Africa, or largely Nigeria and West Africa?
Well, when CCA launched in 2007, the contemporary arts landscape was relatively, almost a desert, should I say. It was very, very lean. And even now, contemporary practice is still on the rise. So we've seen a lot of change in the last 15 to almost 16 years now the organization has been running. But primarily what Bissy wanted to do was actually set up a library. And she says that she wanted to do that because she felt that books offered artists the opportunities to experience other spaces and the wider or the global arts ecosystem where travel was a hindrance. So she felt that artists would be able to discover and travel through books and publications that she would gather through her own journeys. But she felt that after they had done that, they needed a space to present what they'd learned. And so that was why the gallery was now something that she felt was important to add to the space, and the center kind of came into itself. So as an organization, we have a library, we have a gallery, and we have an art school, and we also do publications. So we see ourselves really as an educational or supplementary educational space. We have two audiences, I say. We have the general audience that some of which are interested in contemporary arts and arts. Some are just looking for a place to learn. And then we have the actual arts ecosystem where we run workshops, trainings for artists. And so another thing that is important is our location. So we're actually located in Yaba, which is very close to two art schools. So the Yaba College of Technology and the University of Lagos, whose arts departments we try and work quite closely with the lecturers, with the students. And so arts education, but education as a whole is very slow to change or shift, which means that most artists are using an archaic or maybe an outdated educational system that they're being churned through and coming out of. And so by us being really located very close to the art schools, what we can do is we can provide these kind of learning opportunities to artists that places them in dialogue with the global art space. And so we see ourselves really coming alongside more formal arts education, which is actually focused more on the Beau Arts model, and really is about making as opposed to critical thinking. So that's kind of where we come in. And the ASICO Art School was really founded to do that. So to provide a platform for critical thinking around artistic practice. As an organization, we try to focus on art forms that aren't really as well presented locally. So that's new media arts, so video, sound, virtual realities, contemporary sculpture, installation, social practice as well. And so even though Lagos is an art city and definitely has expanded over the last couple of, maybe decade or so, there's still relatively few places for contemporary artistic practice to be seen. And so we remain like one of the most prominent places for that to take place. As you mentioned, we do see ourselves not just existing locally in Lagos or in Nigeria, but really having a dialogue with our global South partners. And that was something that was really important for Bissy from the beginning. Even when I joined in 2008, we were talking South-South, and we were talking about having these partner organizations on the continent, and we encourage our team to travel, to work collaboratively with other arts organizations as well. And then also globally as well. So our North-South connections are really strong. Bissy obviously growing up, spending a lot of time in the UK and Paris, and myself also growing up in the UK. So it was really important to make sure that the dialogue was both ways, the North-South dialogue and the South-South dialogue taking place at the same time, which has, I think, given CCA a bit of a larger than life I think expression. So I think most people think that we're a much bigger team than we are. because of the kind of projects and programs and places that we are operating out of. So as I mentioned, our team is generally traveling and working internationally, but we also try and run our programming in a way that at least every year we're bringing in an international exhibition so that our local ecosystem is engaging with what's taking place on and off the continent, as well as showcasing local artists so that we are not out of reach or out of touch with what's happening.
What are some of the ongoing projects or initiatives that you're kind of driving this through?
Yeah, sure. So at the moment, we have institutional partnership with Uni Arts. We're working on a funding provided by the Ministry of Education in Finland called FAPI, which is the Finnish African Partnership for Innovation. So we are researching innovations around our ASICO Art School program and just around non-formal platforms for learning. And so that's between Finland and Africa, all the countries that we operate in. We also are in partnership with Hyde Park Art Center as well. So as you mentioned, Bissie's spoken at Northwestern, but she actually came for a residency with Hyde Park Art Center, and something that I also attended last year as well. So we're working out opportunities for bilateral residency programming where we can bring artists from Chicago to Nigeria, and where artists from our ASICO program can also visit Chicago and have post-ASICO programming. With our art school, we say that our participants need to be of African descent. So primarily, and I would say 80% of our participants, 99% of our participants probably to date, are Africans that live on the continent. But our faculty can come from anywhere in the world. And we do that because we realize that the learning does not just take place for our participants, but there's peer-to-peer learning, and there's also learning across the board from participants to faculty as well, because we recognize that many of the faculties that are working internationally in the North likely haven't had these experiences, haven't spent any time learning or teaching on the continent. So those are some of the ways that we're currently collaborating.
I know that one of the barriers for running art organizations in systems like Nigeria or parts of the world where the ecosystem is really small and still developing, one of the barriers is funding. And I remember seeing CCA partnering with Sotheby's and, also collaborating with a number of notable artists to raise funding to expand the CCA space in Lagos, and maybe eventually also all of the programs that you run there. How are you breaching that barrier? What are some of the ways, like you mentioned, the partnership with the organization in Finland and in Hyde Park. So how are you bridging barriers for funding? How are you breaching that, rather?
I think we're taking advantage of probably the same sorts of opportunities that everybody has to do. You have to fill in applications for funding, and definitely leveraging, like you said, partnerships. So for us, what we find is that institutional partnerships really do help. We generally, because a lot of what we're doing is around learning, so we partner with educational organizations more often than not. And we leverage some of their funding as well, because our currency is relatively a lower value to some of the funding that they have. So spending money in Nigeria is not as expensive as spending money in the countries that they operate in. So they get more, should I say, bang for the buck. And then, like you said, we were able to collaborate with Sotheby's. I think it's really important to recognize what the skill sets are in your partners as well. And so making sure that you're both bringing to the table, what your skills are. We were really fortunate in the Sotheby's partnership in that they have a really huge marketing reach. So that was really encouraging for us, because it meant that some of the people who had lost contact with CCA were able to reestablish contact with us, and some of our private donors as well were able to do so.
During the COVID, a lot of things kind of nosedived, even the arts, went berserk, and back then I was still in Nigeria, and artists began to kind of recreate and rethink and reimagine the space. And maybe I'm going to ask you two questions in one. And I wanted to ask you, because I know you've been involved in coordinating arts and medicine, and I know there are some artists also, some of them I know from the Lele Institute, that have participated in that project. And I wanted you to give us some kind of insight into that synergy between art and medicine and what it really means. And also want to ask you, what do artists, kind of articulate in Nigeria? Because Nigeria is a very large, big country with over 200 million people, a lot of paradoxes. And what are Nigerian artists speaking to? What are the themes that they are addressing? And what are those manifestations that come out from these kinds of articulation, that the issues that are of interest to Nigerian artists? I just want to know from
you're saying all of this in context of post-COVID.
Yeah, basically post-COVID.
First of all, our medical systems are strained, completely strained. We've seen a lot of our medical professionals migrate out of the country, so that puts even more pressure. And so people are dealing with mental health issues, even physical health challenges, and they don't have enough support, medical support. So really what arts and medicine does, so I'll put it this way. Arts, it provides, while they're in healthcare settings, it fosters environments for healthcare to improve. So we always say that arts and medicine is not about curing, it's about fostering environments for healing to take place. And so that happens within the hospitals, the hospices, the old people's homes, the children's homes. But now we've seen it in one direction, so going into those spaces. But now I'm quite interested in that actually being reversed. So thinking about creative health, where healthcare professionals and healthcare themes are being presented within art spaces. So inviting psychologists, psychiatrists to come and attend and speak at art events, and partner with artists to deliver programming. That's what I'm kind of interested in presenting more and more in our space, for sure. And I think during COVID, I would even say you guys probably experienced it more internationally, because you had longer lockdowns than we did in Nigeria. And so for most people, they could only turn to the arts to support their well-being and their mental health, whether that was music, drawing, attending classes online, even video games, falls into the creative sector. So I think that's when people really started, the light bulb really went on, and just how much the art sector does to promote, cultivate well-being individually by participating in it, either making, and also, or being part of an audience that experiences. So having both of those kind of conversations happening at the same time is really important. This year, I sat as the director or the chair, should I say, for the National Arts and Health Week in Nigeria. And we were very fortunate. We were able to partner with the WHO and the Jamil Arts and Health Lab, actually, which is in New York. And we were able to have, health professionals really speak to the way they've been able to cultivate and promote well-being, positive mental health through their utilization of the arts, whether that's in waiting rooms with music playing, or taking the pressure off of actual doctors and nurses where they're invited in to participate in arts practices. And also the inclusion of things like virtual reality. So there were virtual reality programs that were going into old people's homes that were just bringing out this new lease of life in them. And so I'm quite interested in that. And hopefully, I do hope that there's an increase in artists that are working in these ways through social practice, through engagement and participation with audiences.
What is like the hope for Nigerian art, in trying times like this? We all know what's going on in Nigeria and Africa and in the broader context, and especially like you rightly mentioned, funding, infrastructure, CCA being lucky, working with Sotheby's and now expanding. There are other arts institutions that haven't been that, will I say lucky, but what do you think, is the future?
They're leading the game.
The future for arts in Nigeria and maybe other African countries.
So for me, I believe in collaboration, that there's so much power in collaboration. I have worked with both of you in different ways. And I think one thing you wouldn't, I just believe in just as people, as an organization, as an art ecosystem, the more we lean on each other, the more we will be able to do. And I feel that I feel privileged that CCA has access to certain spaces. And I think that it is our role that opportunities that come up, that we're able to share them with our ecosystem or provide some level of support so that people do have access to the service as well. I'm really looking forward to people being more experimental with the kind of work that they're making. And that's why it's important to have more spaces that people can do trial and error in, that they don't have to think about the economical impact of having shows in these spaces. And so that's the kind of thing I want to see. I want to see more art and technology, arts. I want to see more like live art, more sculptures in public places, contemporary art sculptures in public places. I have to be very, very specific to that. And I want to see more play as well. So I've really loved Temitayo Gumbi's installation. And to me, she did install it, to be fair, she installed it at the Lagos Biennial. But it's popping up in, all over the world. I would love that to be a permanent structure somewhere, and really thinking about how the general public engages with art. And so that engagement with art inspires them to look past where they are and their, their experiences. And then it gives them like the ability to dream.
Thank you so much, Oyindamola Fayeke, for this very insightful interview with you and for joining us here at PASS. I just wish we had more time with her.
My mind has. I'm moving forward now. I'm thinking about who to share this with. I'm thinking like, art admin students need to have, a copy of this recording to just learn from it. Thank you so much. There was a lot to take away from that.
I think we should invite her another time.
Yes, welcome to Northwestern.
Next time I might be in the actual studio with you guys.
We want you to sit down right beside us, not just having it over Zoom, so that we can talk more.